The throne room stretched higher than most species could see, carved from a single piece of black crystal that seemed to drink in light rather than reflect it. Shalrix sat motionless on his seat of power, golden scales catching the pale glow of Drakmor Prime's twin moons that shone through the massive windows. His eyes, ancient and tired, watched the line of dignitaries that stretched beyond the doors and into the courtyards below. 3,000 years of this. 3,000 years of watching lesser beings grovel and present their treasures as though any object in the universe could impress him anymore. The Chitara ambassador clicked forward on 6 legs, carrying a sphere that pulsed with inner light. The insect-like creature bowed so low its antennae touched the polished floor. Behind it, a dozen attendants held similar spheres, each one containing what the Chitara called their greatest achievement: Eternal Emperor. The ambassador's translator box crackled. We present crystallized moments of time itself. Each sphere holds one perfect second preserved forever. 500 years of work across our finest temporal engineers produced these 17 seconds. Shalrix leaned forward slightly. The spheres were beautiful, he admitted silently. Inside each one he could see frozen moments playing on endless repeat. A star being born, a child's first breath, a warrior's final stand, moments that would never change, never fade, trapped in amber-like stasis. Rejected, Shalrix said. The word echoed through the hall. The Chitara ambassador's antennae drooped, but the creature knew better than to argue. It gathered its spheres and retreated, mandibles clicking in barely concealed disappointment. Chancellor Voss shifted uncomfortably beside the throne. The old dragon, his scales more gray than gold now, had served Shalrix for 800 years. He knew every shift in his emperor's mood, every subtle sign of irritation. My lord, Voss whispered. The Chitara worked for 5 centuries on those gifts. Then they wasted 5 centuries, Shalrix replied without looking at him. Next came the Lumini, beings of pure energy contained in crystalline shells. They floated forward, and the light they radiated made several of the other species shield their eyes. Their gift was bottled starlight, harvested from the hearts of dying suns. Each bottle contained enough energy to power a city for a decade. Rejected. The Deepborn brought singing pearls, grown in the crushing pressure near black hole event horizons. The pearls hummed with harmonies that could cure diseases and extend life. Species had gone to war over single pearls before. Rejected. The pattern continued for hours. The rock-skinned granites offered perfect gemstones grown in their planet's core. The cloud-like whispers brought dreams made solid, thoughts given form that could be experienced like memories. The mechanical coil brought computational matrices that could predict future events with 70% accuracy. Rejected. 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 Voss watched the line dwindle, watched species after species leave with their gift still in hand and shame in their hearts. This ceremony happened once every galactic year, and every time it grew worse. Shalrix had always been selective, but in the past century, he had not accepted a single offering from anyone. The other species are beginning to talk, Voss said quietly when they were alone during a brief recess. They wonder if you mock them deliberately. Let them wonder, Shalrix said, rising from his throne. His wings, folded against his back, stretched briefly. Each wing could have covered a small house. I do not mock them. I simply find nothing they offer worth accepting. But, my lord, surely some of these gifts are things. Voss objects, matter arranged in pleasing patterns or imbued with power. Shalrix walked to one of the tall windows and looked out over his capital city. Millions of beings from hundreds of species lived and worked below. Do you know how many gifts I have received in 3,000 years? No, my lord. Neither do I. I stopped counting at 1 million. Shalrix's voice held no pride, only a deep weariness. 1 million tributes. 1 million attempts to buy my favor, to secure their safety, to prove their worth. And not one of them meant anything. Voss wanted to argue, but found he could not. He had watched his emperor grow colder year by year, century by century. The young dragon who had united the Imperium through strength and wisdom had become this tired creature who found joy in nothing. The ceremony resumed. More species presented more gifts. A flower that bloomed once every 1,000 years. A weapon that could crack planets. A medicine that granted immunity to all known diseases. Books written in languages that no longer existed. Art created by civilizations that had fallen to dust millions of years ago. Shalrix rejected them all with the same flat, emotionless word. As the last supplicant left, Voss approached the throne again. My lord, if I may speak freely. You may. What would you accept? If not treasures, if not power, if not knowledge or beauty or rarity, what gift could possibly satisfy you? Shalrix was quiet for a long moment. The question seemed to catch him off guard as though he had never considered it. His ancient eyes stared at nothing, looking inward at something even he could not name. I do not know, he finally admitted. Perhaps nothing exists that could. That night, alone in his private vault, Shalrix walked among the rejected gifts. They filled a chamber the size of a canyon, stacked and sorted by his automated systems, crystallized time spheres, bottled starlight, singing pearls, mountains of gold and rivers of precious gems, weapons and medicines and art beyond measure, all of it meaningless. He picked up one of the time spheres and watched the frozen moment inside. A Chitara family sharing a meal, all of them clicking happily at each other. The moment looped endlessly, the same gestures, the same expressions of contentment. Shalrix set it down carefully and walked deeper into the vault. Somewhere in here were gifts from species that no longer existed, empires that had fallen, civilizations that had burned out like candles. He had outlived them all, and their gifts remained, gathering dust in his treasure chamber. The emperor of 847 star systems sat down among his worthless riches and felt nothing but the vast, echoing emptiness inside his chest. 3,000 years of existence stretched behind him, and he could not remember the last time anything had made him feel truly alive. Outside, the twin moons set, and dawn began to break over Drakmor Prime. Soon, another day would begin. More petitioners would come, more gifts would be offered, and Shalrix would reject them all, because nothing in the entire universe seemed to matter anymore. Ambassador Florence Reed adjusted her formal uniform for the 5th time, and told herself to stop fidgeting. Around her, the rest of Earth's delegation looked equally nervous, though they tried to hide it behind diplomatic masks. Through the viewport of their shuttle, Drakmor Prime grew larger, its dark surface broken by clusters of light that marked cities containing billions of souls. Humanity had joined the Draconic Imperium only 5 years ago. Before that, Earth had been isolated, unaware that thousands of other intelligent species filled the galaxy. First contact had been peaceful but humbling. Humans were considered a younger race, barely noticed among the older civilizations that had traveled the stars for millennia. First tribute ceremony, muttered Director Lars Hoffman, adjusting the container that held Earth's offering. No pressure at all. Florence smiled despite her nerves. We just need to not embarrass ourselves. That would be a good start. The shuttle docked at one of the Crystal Spire's many ports. As they disembarked, Florence could not help but stare. The building seemed to grow directly from the planet's crust, a tower of black crystal that rose so high its peak disappeared into clouds. Every surface reflected and refracted light in strange ways, making it hard to tell where walls ended and space began. A protocol officer met them, a draconic official whose scales were deep purple. Ambassador Reed, your delegation is expected. Please follow. They walked through corridors that made Earth's finest architecture look primitive. Other species moved past them, some barely glancing at the humans, others staring with curiosity. Florence recognized a few from her briefings. The insect-like Chitara, the floating energy beings called Luminae, dozens of species she had never seen before. How many species are in the Imperium? Asked Dr. Sarah Kim, one of Earth's xenobiologists. 847 at last count, the protocol officer said without turning around. Humanity makes 848. They were led to a waiting area outside the throne room. Through the massive doors, Florence could hear the ceremony in progress. A voice would speak, presenting gifts in elaborate language. Then a single word in response, rejected. Another voice. Another gift. Another rejection. Is that normal? Florence asked quietly. The protocol officer's expression was carefully neutral. The Emperor is selective in his acceptances. Over the next hour, Florence listened to dozens of rejections. Species that had been part of the Imperium for thousands of years left the throne room with their gifts still in hand, looking disappointed or angry or simply resigned. This does not look good for us, Lars whispered. Florence agreed but said nothing. Finally, their names were called. She straightened her uniform one last time and led her delegation into the throne room. The space was overwhelming. Shalrix sat on a throne that seemed carved from darkness itself, his golden scales the only source of warmth in the cold chamber. His eyes fell on the human delegation, and Florence felt the weight of those ancient eyes like physical pressure. She bowed as protocol demanded. Eternal Emperor, humanity presents its tribute, offered in gratitude for our place within the Imperium. Lars stepped forward with the container. Inside was a carefully preserved sample of Earth's biosphere in stasis. Genetic libraries containing every known species from Earth. Cultural archives with humanity's music, art, literature, and history. The finest minds on Earth had worked for 3 years to create this gift. We offer knowledge of our world, Florence continued. The story of our species and our planet preserved for eternity. Everything we are and everything we hope to become. Shalrix did not even look at the container. His eyes remained on Florence for a long moment, then moved past her as though she had already ceased to exist. Rejected. The word hit Florence like cold water. She had expected it, had been warned by other ambassadors that the Emperor rejected almost everything, but hearing it still stung. She bowed again, maintaining her composure, and led her delegation out of the throne room. In the corridor outside, Lars let out a long breath. Well, that went exactly as terribly as I feared. It could have been worse, Florence said, though she was not sure how. They returned to their shuttle in silence. As they prepared to depart, Florence looked out the viewport one more time at the crystal spire. Somewhere in that massive structure, Emperor Shalrix sat on his throne, surrounded by rejected gifts and eternal loneliness. She wondered what it must be like to be so powerful that nothing in the universe impressed you anymore. While the delegation returned to Earth's embassy station, another human ship orbited Drakmor Prime. The new harbor was a refugee transport, its hull scarred from hard use. Inside, 347 children waited for their futures to be decided. Danny Oak sat by a viewport in the children's section, watching the planet below. He was 9 years old, small for his age, with dark hair that never seemed to stay neat and eyes that took in everything around him. In his lap sat a worn backpack containing everything he owned in the universe. "Danny, you need to eat something," said Ms. Rachel, one of the ship's caretakers. She held out a ration bar. "Not hungry," Danny said quietly. Ms. Rachel sighed but did not push. She knew Danny's story. 6 months ago he had lived with his parents on Talos 7, a small farming colony. Then the colony's sun had released a massive solar flare, giving them barely 2 hours to evacuate. Danny's parents had made sure he got on a shuttle. They had not made it themselves. Since then, Danny had been on the new harbor, one of hundreds of orphans being transported to stations where they would be assigned to new families or work programs. He was too young for work, but old enough that most families preferred younger children. His future probably involved a group home on some frontier station, then an apprenticeship on a mining colony when he turned 12. He tried not to think about it. "We get to visit the planet tomorrow," Ms. Rachel said, trying to sound cheerful. "The Imperium has a program where refugees can take guided tours. You will get to see the Crystal Spire Gardens." Danny nodded but said nothing. He had learned that adults liked it when you seemed interested in things even when you were not. That night he pulled out his sketchbook from his backpack. It was half filled with drawings. His parents, his house on Talos 7, the flowers that grew in their garden. He spent hours with his colored pencils, trying to capture memories before they faded. Around him, other children slept or talked quietly. Most had similar stories: lost families, lost homes, lost futures. The new harbor was a ship full of children who had nowhere else to go. Danny turned to a blank page and started drawing the planet below. He did not know much about Drakmor Prime except that it was important, the capital of something huge. He drew the dark continents and the lights of cities, adding stars around it because stars made everything look better. "That is pretty good," said a voice. Danny looked up. Another boy, maybe a year older, looked over his shoulder. "Thanks, you draw a lot?" "Yeah, my mom taught me. She was an artist, was?" Danny looked down at his sketchbook. "She did not make it off Talos 7. The other boy was quiet for a moment. "Sorry, my dad did not make it either. Station accident." They sat together in silence, 2 orphans among hundreds, while the new harbor orbited a planet neither of them would ever call home. Danny went back to his drawing, adding more details to the planet, trying to make it perfect. Drawing made the hurt smaller, made the world make sense in ways that nothing else could. Tomorrow they would visit the surface. Tomorrow he would see the famous gardens. Tomorrow was something to look forward to, even if his future felt empty beyond it. He drew until his eyes grew heavy, then carefully put his pencils away and closed the sketchbook. Outside the viewport, Drakmore Prime turned slowly, indifferent to one small human boy and his simple drawings. The gardens surrounding the crystal spire had been grown over 2,000 years, carefully cultivated by specialist gardeners from a dozen different species. Trees from worlds across the Imperium grew in impossible harmony, their leaves colors that Earth had no names for. Flowers released scents that could make you remember your happiest moments. Water flowed in streams that defied gravity, flowing upward in gentle spirals before raining down in musical patterns. Danny had never seen anything so beautiful in his life. The tour group from the new harbor moved slowly along the marked paths, their guide explaining the origin of each plant in a bored voice. Ms. Rachel counted heads every few minutes, making sure no one wandered off. Danny stayed at the back of the group, trying to see everything at once. When they stopped at a fountain that sprayed water in complex geometric patterns, Danny slipped away. He did not plan it. He just saw a small path leading into a section of garden that glowed with soft blue light, and his feet carried him toward it before he thought about whether he should. The path led to a quiet clearing surrounding a pool of perfectly still water. The trees here had silver bark and leaves that chimed softly when the breeze moved through them. Danny stood at the edge of the pool and stared at his reflection. Behind him, the crystal spire rose like a mountain of shadow and light. He sat down on the grass and pulled out his sketchbook. His hands moved almost automatically, trying to capture what he saw. The silver trees, the still pool, the spire behind everything. He worked quickly, knowing he would probably get in trouble for leaving the group but unable to stop himself. "You are trespassing." Danny jumped, nearly dropping his sketchbook. He turned and saw a dragon standing behind him. Not a draconic person like the protocol officers or guards, but an actual dragon. Massive. Golden scales that seemed to generate their own light. Eyes that looked older than anything Danny had ever seen. "Sorry," Danny said quickly, scrambling to his feet. "I did not mean to. The garden was so pretty and I wanted to draw it." The dragon stared at him for a long moment. Danny waited for guards to appear, for punishment for whatever happened when you broke rules in the Emperor's garden. Instead, the dragon moved closer and sat down near the pool, folding wings that could have covered the entire clearing. "You are human," the dragon said. It was not a question. "Yes, sir. Yes." Danny was not sure how you were supposed to talk to a dragon. Do you live here?" Something that might have been amusement flickered in those ancient eyes. "You could say that. What are you drawing?" Danny looked down at his sketchbook, suddenly embarrassed by his simple pencil and crayon drawing. "Just the garden. I like to draw things so I can remember them. May I see?" Danny hesitated, then turned the sketchbook around. The dragon leaned closer, examining the drawing with an intensity that made Danny nervous. It was not very good, he knew. The proportions were wrong and he had not quite captured the way the light fell through the leaves. "You draw from memory as well?" the dragon asked, noting the other pages. "Yeah, I draw my—" Danny's voice caught. "I draw things I do not want to forget." The dragon said nothing, but something in those eyes changed. Softened, maybe. Danny found himself talking, the words spilling out the way they never did with the adults on the new harbor. "I used to live on Talos 7. It was a farming colony. Not fancy like this place, but it was home. We had a garden too. My mom grew vegetables and flowers. She taught me to draw because she said art helps you see the world properly." Danny flipped through pages, showing sketches of his house, his parents, the fields of Talos 7. Then the sun did something bad. A flare, they called it. We had to leave really fast. My mom and dad made sure I got on a shuttle, but He could not finish the sentence. "They did not survive." The dragon finished gently. "No." Danny wiped his eyes quickly. "So now I am on the new harbor. It is a refugee ship. They are going to find somewhere to put us. Probably a group home, then maybe a mining colony when I am older. That is what happens to kids with no families. You have no one? Just other kids like me. And the caretakers, but they have too many of us to worry about." Danny looked up at the dragon. "You are a really good listener. Most adults just tell me it will be okay and then leave. But you actually let me talk." The dragon was quiet for a long moment, those ancient eyes studying Danny with an expression the boy could not read. "What is your name?" Danny Oakes, what is yours?" Shalrix. The name meant nothing to Danny, he just nodded. "That is a cool name. Sounds important." "Some would say so." Shalrix looked toward the crystal spire. "Do you like it here? On this planet? It is the prettiest place I have ever seen. But I probably will not come back. We only got this tour because the Imperium has programs for refugees. Tomorrow we go back to the ship and wait to find out where they are sending us." Danny looked down at his drawing. "That is why I wanted to draw it. So I can remember." Distant voices called out. Danny Oakes!" Ms. Rachel sounded worried. "I need to go," Danny said quickly. "I am going to be in so much trouble." "Wait." Shalrix's voice stopped him. "You said you draw things to remember them. To thank me for listening, for letting you sit in my garden, may I have one of your drawings?" Danny blinked in surprise. "Really? I mean, they are not very good. I would like one nonetheless." Danny flipped through his sketchbook looking for something worthy of giving away. Most of the drawings were of Talus 7, too precious to part with. But the one he had just made, of the garden and the spire, that was new. Carefully he tore it out of the book. "Here," he said, handing it to Shalrix. Thank you for being nice to me." The drawing was simple. Crayon and colored pencil on paper that was starting to wear thin. It showed the silver trees, the pool, and the crystal spire rising behind them. In the corner, Danny had drawn a small figure of Shalrix sitting by the water. Above it all, in a child's uneven handwriting, he had written, "The kind dragon and thank you." Shalrix took the paper with careful claws, holding it as though it were made of something fragile. He stared at it for a long moment while Danny shifted nervously. "This is..." Shalrix paused. "Thank you, Danny Oakes. You are welcome. I have to go now." "Bye, Mr. Shalrix." Danny ran toward the voices calling his name, leaving his sketchbook behind in his rush. Shalrix watched the small human disappear into the garden paths, then looked down at the drawing in his claws. A crude piece of paper, colors applied by an untrained hand. Proportions wrong. Technique non-existent. Worth less than the cheapest material in his treasure vaults. Yet Shalrix found himself staring at it, unable to look away. "The kind dragon," he read aloud. When was the last time anyone had called him kind? When was the last time anyone had given him something without expecting favor or protection in return? When was the last time anyone had simply thanked him for listening? Guards approached through the garden, attracted by the commotion. Voss was with them, looking concerned. "My lord, is everything all right? We heard there was a trespasser." "There was," Shalrix said, carefully rolling the drawing. "A small human child who got separated from his tour group. He has been returned to his caretakers. Should we increase security?" "No." Shalrix looked at the rolled paper in his claw. "No, that will not be necessary." He walked back to the crystal spire, leaving his confused chancellor behind. In his private chambers, he unrolled the drawing and placed it on his desk. The tribute ceremony would resume tomorrow. More species would bring more elaborate gifts. More treasures would be rejected, but tonight, Emperor Shalrix sat alone and studied a child's drawing. And for the first time in 600 years, he felt something in his chest that might have been warmth. Voss had served Emperor Shalrix for 800 years, and in all that time he had never been summoned to an emergency council session at dawn. Yet here he stood, along with 12 other high-ranking officials, all looking confused and concerned as they gathered in the council chamber. Shalrix entered without ceremony, carrying a rolled piece of paper. He placed it carefully on the table and looked at each council member in turn. "I am accepting a gift," he announced. The silence that followed was absolute. Then everyone started talking at once. "My lord, which species? The crystallized time? The bottled starlight? Did one of yesterday's delegations impress you?" Shalrix raised one claw and silence fell immediately. "None of those. I am accepting a gift from a human child named Danny Oakes. This one." He unrolled the paper on the table. The council members leaned forward, staring at the crayon drawing. Their expressions ranged from confusion to disbelief. "My lord," Voss said carefully, "this is a child's drawing?" "Yes. It has no material value. I am aware. It is not even particularly well executed, if I may say so." "You may. None of that changes my decision." Shalrix looked at the drawing, and something in his expression silenced any further objections. "For the first time in 600 years, I have received a gift that matters. Tomorrow I will announce my acceptance publicly. The news spread across the Imperium faster than light. By evening, every major news network was reporting the same impossible story. Emperor Shalrix, who had rejected gifts from thousands of species for centuries, was accepting a drawing from a human child. Speculation ran wild. What made this drawing special? What technology was hidden in it? What political move was Earth making? Ambassador Florence Reed learned about it when her emergency communicator went off at 3 in the morning. By the time she understood what was happening, her office was flooded with messages from Earth's government, from other species' ambassadors, and from news agencies all demanding to know what humanity had done. "I have no idea," she told Earth's Prime Minister over a secure channel. "We presented our official gift and it was rejected like all the others. I do not know anything about a child or a drawing." "Find out," the Prime Minister ordered. "If the Emperor has taken interest in a human, we need to know why." Florence spent the next 6 hours tracking down every human on Drakmor Prime. Finally, she found a connection to the refugee ship New Harbor. A child had wandered off during a garden tour. The same day, the timing matched. She contacted the ship's captain, Roy Hendricks. The gruff man looked exhausted when his face appeared on her screen. "You want to know about Danny Oakes," he said. It was not a question. "The Emperor has accepted a gift from him. A drawing. Do you know anything about this?" Hendricks sighed. "The kid wandered off during the garden tour yesterday. Ms. Rachel, one of our caretakers, found him talking to someone. She did not realize it was the Emperor himself until later. Apparently they had a conversation and Danny gave him a drawing from his sketchbook." "What kind of conversation?" "No idea. Danny is not much of a talker. Lost his parents in the Talos 7 evacuation. Good kid, quiet, likes to draw. That is all I know." Florence made several more calls, piecing together what little information existed. By the time the official announcement was scheduled, she knew almost nothing except that a 9-year-old orphan had somehow impressed the most powerful being in the galaxy. The throne room was packed with representatives from hundreds of species. Shalrix entered and the crowd fell silent. He did not sit on his throne. Instead, he stood before it holding the drawing. "For 600 years I have rejected every gift brought before me," Shalrix began. His voice carried to every corner of the vast chamber. "Species have offered me treasures beyond measure. Technology, art, power, knowledge. I found all of it meaningless." He held up the drawing. "2 days ago a human child gave me this. A simple drawing worth nothing in material terms. Yet it is the first gift in centuries that I will accept." The crowd murmured. Shalrix continued. "This child did not give me this drawing to buy favor. He did not seek protection or alliance. He gave it to me as thanks for one simple act. I listened to him. I allowed him to speak about his grief, his lost family, his uncertain future. And for that basic kindness, he gave me the only thing of value he possessed, a moment of his time and effort captured on paper." Shalrix looked out at the assembled species. "How many of you have given gifts hoping to impress me? To secure your position? To demonstrate your worth?" Silence answered him. "All of you. Every single tribute brought to this chamber has been a transaction. Gifts given with expectation of return. But this child expected nothing. He simply wanted to say thank you." Voss watched from his position beside the throne. He had never heard Shalrix speak with such emotion. The Emperor's voice was not loud, but it carried weight that made everyone in the chamber lean forward, straining to hear. "I want to meet with this child again," Shalrix announced. "I request that Ambassador Reed arrange this meeting." Florence stood, trying to keep her composure. "Of course, Eternal Emperor. May I ask why?" "Because in 3,000 years he is the first being to see me as something other than a throne to bow before, or a power to fear. He saw someone who listened, someone kind. I wish to understand what else he sees." The meeting was arranged for the following day. Florence personally went to the New Harbor to collect Danny, who looked terrified when she explained what was happening. "But I did not do anything wrong," Danny insisted. "I just gave him a drawing." "You are not in trouble," Florence assured him. "The Emperor specifically asked to see you." Danny was cleaned up and put in new clothes that the New Harbor's fabricators had quickly made. He clutched his sketchbook like a lifeline as Florence led him to the crystal spire. Ms. Rachel came too, equally nervous. They were shown to a private chamber, smaller than the throne room but still grand by any standard. Shalrix waited there, looking somehow less intimidating than in the garden. When Danny entered, the Emperor's expression softened. "Hello again, Danny Oakes." "Hi, Mr. Shalrix." Danny looked around nervously. Are you angry about the drawing? I can make you a better one if you want. I am not angry. I wanted to thank you properly. Oh, you are welcome. Danny hesitated. Everyone is acting really weird about the drawing. Is it because I put kind dragon and you are actually a different kind of dragon? Despite himself, Shalrix felt his mouth curve into something almost like a smile. Something like that. Danny, may I ask you something? Sure. Why did you draw that picture for me? Danny thought about it. Well, you were the first person in forever who actually asked about my drawings. And you listened when I talked about my mom and dad. Nobody else has time to do that. Ms. Rachel is nice, but she has like 300 kids to watch. The other adults just say sorry for your loss and walk away. But you actually listened. That meant something. Shalrix felt something in his chest tighten. And that was worth giving me your art? It was just one drawing. I have lots more. Danny opened his sketchbook. See, I draw all the time. It helps me feel less alone. Alone, Shalrix repeated quietly. Yes, I understand that feeling. You do? But you live in this huge place and everyone knows who you are. Being known is not the same as being understood. Danny, I have lived for 3,000 years and until yesterday, I could not remember the last time someone gave me something without wanting something in return. Danny looked up at him with those two old eyes that had seen too much loss. That sounds really lonely. It is. They sat in silence for a moment. Then Danny said, if you want, I could draw you something else sometime. Just because, not for any reason. Shalrix looked at this small human child who had accidentally reminded him what it felt like to be seen as a person rather than a power, an idea formed reckless and unprecedented. Danny, what do you want? In your future, I mean. If you could have anything, the boy did not hesitate. I just want to not be alone anymore, and maybe to keep drawing, but mostly the first thing. If I could arrange for you to stay here on this planet, would you want that? Danny's eyes went wide. Really? But I'm just an orphan. Nobody wants orphans unless they need workers. I want you, Shalrix said simply. I want you to stay here to study at the best schools to draw as much as you wish. And perhaps sometimes you could draw for me, not as payment, simply as friends. Friends? Danny whispered the word like it was precious. If you would like that. Danny nodded, unable to speak. Shalrix looked at Ambassador Reed. Make the arrangements. I am sponsoring this child's education personally. He will have quarters in the Crystal Spire and access to whatever resources he requires. Florence could barely believe what she was hearing. My lord, this is unprecedented. Yes, it is. Shalrix looked back at Danny. Sometimes the most valuable things come in the simplest packages. This child reminded me of that truth. 6 months had passed since Danny Oakes moved into the Crystal Spire, and the change was visible throughout the Imperium. Not in grand declarations or new policies, but in small quiet ways that added up to something profound. Danny's quarters occupied a section of the spire that had been empty for centuries. The rooms were far too large for one small boy, but he had filled them with drawings. They covered the walls, hundreds of them, showing everything from the view outside his window to portraits of the various aliens he met daily. The latest drawing showed Shalrix reading in his study, scales catching the light, looking peaceful. You made my snout too big, Shalrix commented, examining the drawing. No, I did not. It is exactly that big. Danny was working on another sketch, his tongue sticking out slightly in concentration. You just do not like seeing yourself the way you actually look. Impertinent child. You say that every time. Shalrix made a sound that might have been a laugh. He had been making that sound more often lately, much to Voss's quiet amazement. The Emperor, who had not smiled in centuries, now spent his evenings in quiet conversation with a 9-year-old human, discussing topics ranging from the nature of the universe to whether purple or blue was a better color. Danny attended the Imperial Academy, studying alongside children from dozens of species. At first, the other students had been terrified of him, convinced that anyone sponsored by the Emperor must be important and dangerous. It took them several weeks to realize that Danny was just Danny, quiet, kind, and always carrying his sketchbook. Can you draw me? Asked a young Chitara student one day during lunch. Danny looked up from his food. Sure, stay still. He sketched quickly, capturing the way the Chitara's antennae curved and how their multiple eyes reflected light differently. The Chitara was delighted with the result and showed it to everyone. Soon, half the school wanted portraits, but the real changes were happening in the throne room. The next tribute ceremony after Danny's arrival had been different from any in recent memory. When the Chitara ambassador presented crystallized time spheres again, Shalrix did not immediately reject them. "Tell me about the process," Shalrix said instead. The ambassador's antennae shot up in surprise. "My lord? You said these took 5 centuries to create. I wish to understand how." And so the Chitara explained. The delicate temporal engineering. The patience required. The dozens of artisans who had devoted their lives to capturing single perfect moments. Shalrix listened to every word, and when the explanation finished, he accepted one of the spheres. "For the dedication shown in its creation," he said. News of the acceptance spread like wildfire. The Chitara delegation left in a state of shock and joy. They had been trying for 300 years to have a gift accepted, the pattern repeated with other species. The Lumini brought bottled starlight again, and this time Shalrix asked about the star divers who harvested it, risking their energy forms in the hearts of dying suns. He accepted 3 bottles and requested to meet the divers personally. The Deepborn brought singing pearls, and Shalrix spent an hour listening to their harmonies before accepting the one whose song resonated with something deep in his chest. He asked the Deepborn ambassador about their homeworld, their culture, their dreams for the future. Voss watched these changes with a mixture of relief and wonder. "My lord, may I speak candidly? Have you ever done otherwise?" Shalrix replied, not looking up from the report he was reading. "You have changed since the boy arrived." "Have I?" "You know you have. The entire Imperium has noticed. Some are calling it the softening, others the awakening. The betting pools cannot decide if this is permanent or temporary." Shalrix set down his report and looked at his old friend. "I spent 600 years rejecting everything because I could see only the material value of gifts. I forgot to see the beings behind them, their effort, their hope, their desire to be acknowledged as more than subjects. And Danny reminded you of this?" "Danny saw me. Not the Emperor, not the power, just someone who listened when he needed someone to listen. That simple act of recognition changed something in me." Shalrix stood and walked to the window. 3,000 years old and a 9-year-old child taught me how to see again. Evening found Shalrix in Danny's quarters, where the boy was working on a painting with brushes a Lumine artist had given him. The painting showed the throne room, but not from any angle a normal viewer would see. It was from above looking down, showing Shalrix surrounded by representatives from hundreds of species, all of them connected by threads of light. "What is this one called?" Shalrix asked. "Connection," Danny said simply. "It is how I see this place. Everyone connected to everyone else, with you in the middle holding it all together." Shalrix studied the painting quietly. "That is not how I have seen it. I always thought I stood apart, above. Maybe you used to, but not anymore." Danny added more gold to Shalrix's scales. "You know what is weird? When I first got here, I was so scared. I thought I would be alone forever. But now I have friends at school and you and all these people who actually care. You gave that to yourself, Danny. By being who you are. Maybe. But you helped. You showed everyone that it is okay to be kind." Danny set down his brush. "Can I ask you something?" "Always. Why were you so sad before? I mean, you had everything. This huge palace, all the power, everyone listening to you. What made you so lonely?" Shalrix sat down, folding his wings carefully. "Having everything is not the same as having something that matters. For centuries, everyone who approached me wanted something. Protection, favor, alliance. No one wanted simply to know me. After enough time, I forgot what that felt like. I convinced myself it did not matter. But it did matter. Yes, it did. Very much." Shalrix looked at the painting again. "You gave me a drawing and expected nothing in return. That shocked me awake. Made me realize how empty my existence had become." Danny was quiet for a moment, then said, "The other kids at school, a lot of them are orphans too, from the New Harbor and other ships. They are being assigned to work programs and stuff. It does not seem fair." "Fair how?" "Well, I got lucky because you like me. But they are good kids too. They deserve chances just like I got." Shalrix recognized something in Danny's voice, the same quality that had made him listen in the garden months ago. Genuine concern for others with no ulterior motive. "What would you have me do?" he asked. "I do not know. Maybe make a program or something? So orphans do not just get sent to mines or factories, so they can learn and grow and maybe find families who want them, not just workers." The next morning, Shalrix called a council session. By afternoon, he had drafted the framework for the Imperium's first comprehensive orphan welfare program. Every species would be required to provide education and care for children who lost their families. Work assignments would be banned for anyone under 16. Resources would be allocated for proper housing, schooling, and family placement services. The boy suggested this, did he not? Voss asked when they were alone. He saw a problem and mentioned it. I saw the solution. He is changing the Imperium through you. No. Shalrix corrected gently. He is reminding the Imperium of what we forgot. That compassion has value. That kindness matters. That sometimes the smallest voice speaks the deepest truth. The program was announced the following week. Reactions varied wildly. Some species praised it immediately. Others grumbled about costs and logistics. But none could deny that it came from the Emperor himself, and his will was law. Danny continued attending school, drawing pictures, and spending evenings with Shalrix. He did not fully understand the changes he had catalyzed. He just knew that he was happy, that he had found a home, and that the dragon he had called kind had proven to be exactly that. The next tribute ceremony arrived, and Shalrix found himself actually looking forward to it. Not for the gifts themselves, but for the opportunity to acknowledge the beings behind them, to see the effort and meaning rather than just the material value. When the Chitara ambassador approached this time, Shalrix smiled. Welcome back, my friend. What stories do you bring me today? In his quarters, carefully preserved in a crystal case on his desk, the original drawing remained. Crayon and pencil on worn paper, the kind dragon and thank you in a child's handwriting. Worth nothing and everything at the same time. Shalrix looked at it often, reminding himself of the moment everything changed. The moment a small human boy had seen past the throne, and the power to the lonely being beneath, and had offered kindness without expecting anything in return. 3 years had changed everything and nothing. The crystal spire still rose above Drakmor Prime like a mountain of shadow and light. The Draconic Imperium still spanned 847 star systems. Emperor Shalrix still sat on his throne, but something fundamental had shifted in the fabric of how the Imperium worked. Danny was 12 now, taller but still small for his age. His quarters in the Crystal Spire had expanded to include a proper art studio, where he worked with materials from across the galaxy. His drawings had evolved from simple sketches to sophisticated works that galleries requested to display. He always refused, preferring to give his art to friends or to Shalrix, who had an entire wing of his private chambers dedicated to Danny's work. The Imperial Academy had awarded Danny early admission to their Advanced Diplomatic Studies program. Not because of his connection to Shalrix, but because he had a gift for understanding people, human and alien alike. His teachers noted that he listened the way few students did, giving others his full attention regardless of their species or status. Today was special. 3 years exactly since that day in the garden. The anniversary had been declared an official holiday across the Imperium, the day of true tribute. Instead of bringing material gifts, species now brought stories, performances, and personal offerings that represented meaning rather than wealth. The throne room was packed. Delegates from every member species had come to participate in the transformed ceremony. The atmosphere was completely different from 3 years ago. Where there had been nervous formality, now there was genuine warmth. Species mingled freely, sharing food and conversation. Shalrix entered with Danny walking beside him. The sight had become familiar to the Imperium, but it still drew smiles. The ancient dragon emperor and the young human boy, an unlikely pair that had changed the galaxy. The ceremony began. The Chitara ambassador approached first as tradition demanded. Eternal Emperor, eternal friend, she began, using the new honorific that had spread throughout the Imperium. We bring you no crystals today. Instead, we bring a performance. 6 Chitara musicians emerged, carrying instruments carved from the shells of their homeworld's ancient creatures. They played a composition they had written specifically for this day, a piece that captured both the loneliness of isolation and the joy of connection. The music was beautiful, complex, and deeply moving. Shalrix listened with his eyes closed, letting the harmonies wash over him. When it ended, he stood and bowed to the musicians, accepted with gratitude. Your gift touches something that no material wealth could reach. The Lumine came next. not with bottled starlight, but with a light sculpture they created in real time, shaping their own energy into forms that told the story of the Imperium's transformation. They showed Shalrix alone in darkness, then light spreading from a small figure until the entire space glowed with connection. Species after species presented offerings of art, music, stories, and personal meaning. A Deepborn sang a song about their people's gratitude for the orphan welfare program that had saved thousands of their children. The granites carved a sculpture during the ceremony itself, their stone fingers shaping rock into a perfect replica of that first drawing. The whispers created a shared dream that let everyone experience the moment when everything changed, seen through Danny's innocent eyes. Danny watched it all, overwhelmed. "I did not know," he whispered to Shalrix. "I did not know it would become this." "Neither did I," Shalrix admitted. "But that is the nature of genuine kindness. It spreads in ways we cannot predict or control." When all the presentations were finished, Shalrix stood before his assembled Imperium. The throne room fell silent. "3 years ago I was lost," he began. His voice carried to every corner of the vast space. "I had power beyond measure, wealth that could buy worlds, the loyalty of billions, and I felt nothing but emptiness. I rejected every gift because I could not see their value. I could not see the beings behind them." He placed one claw gently on Danny's shoulder. Then a 9-year-old human child who had lost everything gave me a drawing he made with crayons and pencils. He gave it to me simply because I listened to him. He expected nothing in return. He saw me not as an emperor, but as someone who had been kind to him. Shalrix looked out at the thousands of faces watching him. That child cracked something inside me, made me remember what I had forgotten across 3,000 years of existence. That meaning does not come from what we possess, but from how we connect with others. That true gifts are acts of recognition, moments of genuine acknowledgement, offerings of time and attention. Danny looked up at Shalrix, seeing emotions flicker across the ancient dragon's face. Pride, affection, something that might have been love. "Danny Oakes reminded me why civilizations exist," Shalrix continued. "Not for conquest or accumulation of power, not to dominate or control, but to create spaces where beings can connect with each other, to build something larger than ourselves through recognition and care." He reached into his robes and pulled out the original drawing, still preserved in its crystal case. "This piece of paper is worth nothing materially, but it is the most valuable thing in my possession. It represents the moment I stopped being just an emperor and remembered how to be a person." Ambassador Florence Reed stood in the crowd, thinking about that day 3 years ago when she had presented Earth's gift and been rejected. She had watched the transformation of the Imperium from that moment forward, seen how one child's simple kindness had rippled outward until it changed the nature of galactic civilization itself. "Today," Shalrix announced, "I am making another unprecedented decision." The crowd leaned forward, curious. "I am formally adopting Danny Oakes as my ward and heir apprentice." Gasps echoed through the throne room. Danny's eyes went wide with shock. "Not to inherit my throne," Shalrix clarified quickly. "The Imperium will choose its next emperor through traditional means when my time ends, but to inherit my responsibility. The responsibility of keeping the Imperium connected to its heart, of remembering that power serves those it governs, not the other way around." He looked down at Danny. "If you will accept this honor." Danny could barely speak. Yes, of course." The throne room erupted in approval. Species from across the galaxy celebrated the formal recognition of what everyone had already known, that this small human boy had become central to the Imperium's identity. That evening, after the celebrations had quieted, Shalrix and Danny sat in the garden where they had first met. The silver trees chimed in the breeze and the still pool reflected the stars overhead. "Do you understand what today means?" Shalrix asked. "I think so. You are making me officially part of your family." "Yes, but more than that. I am trusting you to carry forward what you taught me, to remind those who come after us that compassion has value, that kindness matters, that the smallest gestures can change everything." Danny was quiet for a moment, processing. "That is a lot of responsibility." "It is, but you have already been doing it without realizing it. The way you befriend other students, the way you advocate for orphans, the way you see people as people, regardless of what they look like or where they come from." Shalrix's voice was warm. "You changed an empire simply by being yourself. Imagine what you can do when you try. I am scared I will mess it up." "You will sometimes. I certainly have. But the trying matters more than perfect success. Shalrix pulled out a new drawing Danny had given him that morning. It showed the throne room from today, filled with beings from hundreds of species, all connected by invisible threads of light and understanding. At the center stood Shalrix and Danny together. "What is this one called?" Shalrix asked, though he thought he knew. "Family," Danny said simply. "That is what the Imperium is now. Not just an empire, a family." Years passed. Danny grew into an adult, becoming one of the Imperium's most respected diplomats and a celebrated artist whose work was displayed in museums across 1,000 worlds. He married eventually, a kind woman from the deep-born species, and they had children who grew up playing in the Crystal Spire's gardens. Ambassador Florence Reed, now retired, visited Drakmor Prime one last time before her final return to Earth. She found Shalrix in his study, walls still covered with drawings. Many were Danny's, but now there were also crude sketches from Danny's children, drawn with the same crayons and pencils their father had once used. "It is strange," Florence said, studying the collection, "to think that all of this started with one rejected gift and one accepted drawing." "Not strange," Shalrix corrected gently. "Natural. The most profound changes often begin with the smallest gestures." Through the window, they could see Danny in the garden with his young daughter. He was teaching her to draw, showing her how to see the world in terms of light and shadow, just as his mother had taught him years ago on a farming colony that no longer existed. "He gave you back your heart," Florence said. "He reminded me I had one to begin with." Shalrix's ancient eyes were soft as he watched Danny and the child. "I thought I needed grand gestures to feel alive again, treasures beyond imagining, power without limit. But all I really needed was someone to see me, to recognize me as more than my position, to offer simple gratitude without expectation. And in return you gave him a family, a home, a future. In return he gave me the same. We saved each other." Florence left shortly after, carrying the memory of the ancient dragon emperor sitting, surrounded by children's drawings, looking more content than any being with infinite power had a right to be. The original drawing remained on Shalrix's desk, protected in its crystal case. Sometimes, when the weight of empire felt too heavy, he would look at those simple crayon lines and remember. Remember a small boy who had lost everything but still had kindness to give. Remember that the most valuable gifts cost nothing materially but everything emotionally. Remember that sometimes the entire universe can change because one person says thank you and means it. The Draconic Imperium thrived under the principles that Danny's simple drawing had awakened, not through conquest or force, but through recognition and connection. The Day of True Tribute became one of the most important holidays across 847 star systems, an annual reminder that meaning matters more than material, and that genuine gratitude can reshape reality. And in a garden of silver trees and still pools where an ancient dragon had once met an orphaned human child, the wind chimed through the leaves like soft music, singing a song of kindness that would never end.